Behind me is one of the most recognisable cars from the South Island Endurance Racing Championship. This car's been racing in a different guise here for around about 14 years, and it's now been reshelled as a GT86. I'll get a bit of a history on this car. We've got Ryan here from 86 Enduro, and Ryan actually introduces himself as a Kiwi backyard motorsport engineer, and he's pretty much a jack of all trades. So Ryan, let's go back before we talk about your jack of all trades, motorsport engineering, Kiwi backshed mentality. Let's talk about the development of this car, because it actually started out as a front wheel drive AE101 Toyota chassis. So it's now rear wheel drive and it's got a 2JZ, so it's about as far from where it started as it could be. Can you talk us through the thought process of developing this car to start with?
So originally it was developed to be the GT3 beta of its day, which was probably 12 to 14 years ago when the car was developed. So the idea was a light chassis, which is the AE101 chassis, and then put a super engine directly up in the middle of that for perfect weight distribution. That was a long time ago now, and things have changed a lot since then, but that was the pick of the day, yeah.
And back at that time, so 12 to 14 years ago when the car was developed, from what I understand talking to you off camera, it was there or thereabouts in terms of being competitive with the Porsches of that era?
Yeah, it was very competitive. Obviously, any car has a development phase, and it was very quick, but obviously teething issues and other things. And then obviously the Porsches, they get a new car every year, and they're not the same car each round, yeah.
And I think it's important to understand there as well that it is difficult for a privateer team to sort of beat what is a factory workshop team with almost unlimited resources. So fair to say those Porsches in particular, in the 12 or 14 years since the car was developed, they've come a long way. Now, looking into the engine bay, the most obvious aspect is the location of that 2JZ. So as you mentioned, you're trying to get around a 50% weight balance. I'd just say that I wouldn't be super keen on changing the spark plug. So tell us how that goes.
So number one you can definitely take out, and you can get number two out. Anything else basically engine related is an engine out job for anything. So if you come to the track, you've got to have it right. You're not doing a gasket or a seal or a wire anywhere. Everything has to be perfect.
Now, could you talk to us about the rules? Are there anything around that, around engine location, or are you literally allowed to do anything you like there?
Luckily with this series it's pretty open. I'm pretty sure it's the number one spark plug in front of the firewall. Probably push that right to the edge on this one. But there is a whole bunch of different series with different regulations, and this is pretty open to basically do what you like. Yeah.
Now, you're aiming for that 50% weight distribution, so how close did you actually get that?
It's very close. It's that 49.9, you know, depending on the day and the weight of the driver. It's as close as you can get without redeveloping the rear of the car as well for some better weight distribution, yeah.
Now you've also got, we'll talk a little bit out of order here, but in terms of the weight distribution, you've got the fuel cell sitting essentially at the rear of the car. So of course that weight split, weight balance is going to change as the fuel load burns down?
Yeah, so that's not the ideal location, but obviously a lot more engineering required to put it in the middle of the car, and that was the original location of it. You know, that was where they put them back then. There wasn't mid-mounted fuel tanks like a GT3 has now, yeah.
All right, before we get into the engine specification and the rest of the running gear, obviously the main thing is it is no longer an AE101, and I remember seeing this car not long after the GT86 was released, sort of rolled out looking like a brand new car, but it's not quite. How did that go down?
So obviously everyone else is getting new cars, and the owner of the car decided that he wanted, you know, a freshen up, and the way to do that was we'll put the shell of a GT86 basically onto our original chassis and subfloor, yeah.
So it's essentially still an AE101 front-wheel drive chassis,
yep.
And you've got a GT86 body stitched on top?
Yeah, it's still got the AE101 firewall, floor pan, a lot of the rear of the car is still AE101, and it's literally just the outside skin that you see is the GT86.
So how much challenge did that actually create doing that? It sounds like a hell of a lot of work.
So it looks simple when you see it, but there's actually a few panels that are not the correct length. Some panels are a direct fit. The whole side panel, door trim up into the rear pillow is a factory GT86 panel. The roof is a GT86 item, but there's some other items that are not the correct length, guards and doors and other bits that have to be trimmed. But
I guess the other thing when you're building a race car as well is best laid intents aside, sometimes accidents happen, so if you can be using factory components, it's going to make life a lot easier when it comes to replacing them.
Exactly, yeah, so that was the idea, was to try and keep it as factory as we could, but obviously once we started doing it, realised that wasn't always an option. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the engine. The 2JZ, obviously no slouch. It's a well-proven package, and in drag applications, this guy's pushing 2.5, 3,000 horsepower. Yeah. Obviously, you want reliability here, and you don't need anything like that. So can you talk us through what it's actually producing and the sort of the design mentality behind your power targets?
So originally we would import taxi engines out of Japan and bolt them directly in the car. They were reliable. They would make around the 550 horsepower mark, and that's how it sort of started off. Since then, we've actually updated the camshaft and made a few more changes to get it around that 6 to 630 horsepower mark, which is it's enough here, and it is reliable, which is the key here, is to finish races.
Yeah, absolutely. For endurance racing, the power is definitely not the key element. So when you're talking about that 630 odd horsepower, are you talking flywheel, or is that at the wheels?
That's at the wheels, hub dyno. Yep.
Now, again, not a big stretch for a 2JZ. Well, the key to making that power, though, of course, is the turbo package, and it's actually quite interesting what you've got going on there compared to what we see now with the modern take on 2JZ turbocharged engines. Talk us through what you've got in the turbo package.
So obviously the original package was literally a factory engine bolted in there, so it's a factory twin turbo setup. We have developed it since then. It's got new manifolds, it's had different turbos changed, but it is still the twin turbo application, which sounds cool on paper. Obviously, as times have gone on, turbo technology has changed quite a lot, but it's cool that it's still a twin turbo car. It sounds cool when you say it, yeah.
And the specific turbos you're using?
They're GT2871Rs, and they've got to be replaced every 2 years.
Replaced every 2 years, so why is that?
Yeah, that's completely stuffed, yeah. It's that hot in there.
So, I mean, that's one of the downsides, I guess, with the packaging. You've got everything mounted so far back that the turbos are actually behind the firewall, essentially. So, is this down to sort of lack of airflow? Basically, it's an oven in there?
It is an oven, yeah. The driver's clutch foot will melt if the driver rests his boot hard onto the firewall. Yeah, it's very hot in there. And you've got to appreciate it's an hour and a half stint for a driver and a 3-hour runtime for a car. So, the temperature you build is, you just can't fathom how hot everything gets, yeah.
So fair to say, with the updates in technology, given that this selection was made 12 odd years ago, if you were to do it again with another 2JZ turbo engine, single or twin?
Yeah, so the new car we are going to hopefully run next year will be a single turbo, yeah. Mainly for packaging, and it's so much easier. You do a boost leak test on this, and it takes you a while.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of people overlook with the twin turbos is just the complexity of working on the system, particularly when you've got it mid-mounted like this. There's a lot more moving parts, and the difficulty of actually accessing parts gets really frustrating.
Yeah, the wastegate's the same. The wastegates are a service item. They do a year. Turbo smart gates, they're good, but you put them where those ones are, and they don't last. So we are a yearly service item for a wastegate as well. That's just the packaging, it's just how it is, yeah.
Now, the other aspect there, just going back to the original AE101, obviously it's a front-wheel drive chassis, so clearly it's converted to rear-wheel drive, and we'll talk about some of the other elements, but in terms of the front and rear suspension converting to rear-wheel drive, what did you choose there?
So originally the car was fitted with an RX-7 suspension package, front and rear, RX-7 differential. It had endless issues with the RX-7 differential exploding. So 2014, which so 6 years ago now, they redeveloped the car again, and it's had a fully CAD drawn front and rear suspension package, double wishbone with RX-7 front uprights and Supra rear uprights. So quite a substantial package underneath the car that probably no one actually sees, yeah.
But again, just all in the aid of being reliable at the power levels and for endurance racing.
Exactly, yeah. So we knew we needed stronger wheel bearings, we knew we needed a stronger diff, and so we picked the items we wanted, which was strong front wheel bearings, a strong Supra rear end we knew was good, and then
I think that's an area that, again, a lot of people easily overlook with modified street cars, or even the odd sort of weekend warrior race car. The load on the wheel bearings, you just got no idea what goes into it when you step up to endurance racing, particularly with a wide slick, and getting something that is reliable in there is really, really critical. Let's talk about the rest of the drivetrain as well. So what have you got in the way of a gearbox there?
So it's a Hollinger RD6S gearbox. It didn't have that originally. That was obviously installed after the car was originally built. It's probably a 14-year-old. It's been in there a long time. It's the original case. A lot of the original gears. We've replaced a couple of parts, but to be fair, it's been a very reliable gearbox.
I think Hollinger have got a name as being one of the most reliable out there in the industry, although pretty high ticket price to get in. But again, if you've got a gearbox that's going to last 14 years, that starts to look pretty cheap. The dog engagement 6-speed sequential gearbox like that, you've got the ability to use flat shifting. So are you incorporating that?
Yeah, so we run the Hollinger gear knob on the top, flat shifted. It still runs a cable throttle that was just originally fitted. We can't change the intake manifold. It's a bit hard to get a throttle body on there that's electronic, so we've just stuck with the flat on the upshift and the blip on the downshift.
So the driver still actually has to do the hard work on the downshift and match rev?
Yeah, and that's actually a cool thing as a driver. The drivers of the car do enjoy being able to actually blip the throttle, you know, and it's an art, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely arguments both ways, and there's no doubt that going to the likes of paddle shifted gearboxes with auto blip, it does take away from some of the driver skill for sure. Electronics package in the car, what are you running there? What's controlling all of this?
So it's a Link G4 Extreme ECU. We've run Link ECUs. The owner of the car actually ran them originally in his jet boat, so for a very long time. We're talking back to the dial on the jet boat days, and so he's pretty true to being loyal to Link. We've had a good run out of the package, and yeah.
Is there anything specific you're doing with the tuning of it because of the endurance application in terms of fuel saving strategies, or for that matter, engine protection strategies?
So a lot of it is engine protection strategies. Anyone that looked at the tune would say, holy shit, you're a rich as, and you're not running a lot of timing, and you know, why is it running so rich on the decel? And that's all to try and keep it going, you know, try to cool the burn wherever we can. To be fair, trusting someone to tune an endurance car, a lot of people don't understand the complexities required to do with the heat soak, and we look over the data after every race. There's a whole race worth of data that you've got to go through and check and make sure everything is right, because over the 3 hours things can actually change. You know, it might be perfect on the dyno, you know, when you do it for 2 or 3 hours on the dyno, but it's completely different on the track.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand, is even with a real good quality dyno, it's very hard to replicate the temperatures and airflow that we'll see out on the racetrack. And as you say, it's one thing even tuning a car for a sprint race, but very different matter holding it together for 2-3 hours in a row with that temperature management. Well, look, the car is amazing there, Ryan, and it's good to actually get a bit of an insight into what actually goes on inside of it. So thanks for the tour there, and we wish the team all the best for the weekend.
Hope you see you at the end. Thanks.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.